and welcome to the Life on the Fulcrum podcast. This podcast comes from the Vineyard Church of Wellsboro, and I'm your host, Carolyn Ruth. Some of our guests will be from within our own Vineyard Church, and others will not. Occasionally, I may even do a solo podcast without a guest. On this podcast, we will discuss what it means to live a life of faith on the fulcrum. What that means to us is being able to hold things in tension as we follow Jesus. A great example of living in this tension is one of our core beliefs of our church, which is that we want to be equally spiritually powerful, biblically thoughtful, and culturally relevant. Thanks for joining us today. Hey, Life on the Fulcrum listeners. Today I have a guest, and his name is Dan Krise, and I'm hoping to make this a recurring segment every, 6 to 8 weeks or something, where he and I will discuss various resources that we have found to be helpful, such as podcasts, or books, or audiobooks, or apps, or all kinds of things, music, anything we come across that seems like a helpful resource we want to share with you. So enjoy our resource roundup for today. So welcome, Life on the Fulcrum listeners. Today I have Dan Krise with me, and I am super excited about Dan. So thanks for being here, Dan.
It is my pleasure.
One of the things I love about Dan is that he is a voracious reader. And he told me, Dan, did you tell me once that you read about 6 books a week? Is that right?
I'm on average about four.
Okay.
At one time I was probably at 6, but with kids and full-time job, it's just too hard. And the fact that, well, you've seen Soul, right? You've seen Soul, of course you have. Mm-hmm. Yes, those little bubbles where the people are in the zone. Yeah, I'm one of those bubbles. Yes. So that's another reason you can't read as much.
When you're in, you're all in.
Yes.
Well, and I'll just throw in a little plug for the movie Soul now that you mentioned it, because my brother is actually the bass player on the soundtrack of that movie. So
the soundtrack's fantastic.
It's special for me for that reason, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Philip Keane. You can look for his name. Actually, he's listed as Phil.
Phil. I was like, hey, it's Phil, guys.
I know. It's so funny because all of his professional friends and his friends that he's grown up with since he was a kid all call him Phil. But of course, in our family, we always called him Philip. Mm-hmm. And I can't think of him as Phil. But it's funny because my husband, John, is actually Jonathan. And there again, everyone calls him John. But when we go back to visit his family near Philly, everyone calls him Jonathan. All his family. So I think that's a family thing. Does your family call you Daniel?
Only when I'm in trouble.
Oh, even now.
Even now. Yep.
Cool. All right. So can you just start, especially since this is your first time on the podcast, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Where you grew up, your faith journey a little bit, your family, job?
Yeah. So been married in February 19th. When the guys are going to the Hatchet House, day of my anniversary. I'll be missing that. Which is fine. It's fine. I think Colleen and I might just show up anyways, but we'll be married 18 years. We have 3 children. Our first grandchild came in August, little Maggie.
Wow.
Maggie May. She's adorable. Being a grandparent it's a sea change, definitely a different world. I grew up in McKean County. It's a couple hours to the west, in Bradford, Pennsylvania. Born and raised. When I was in my early 20s, I got laid off from a factory job and started working in the oil field. It was just something to get me through until I went to college, and it paid really well. So go in debt or do a trade job and make lots of money. So 23 years later, still in the industry, and about 8 years ago, it brought me here to Tioga County for about 18 months. And then we moved to Newcastle for a year. And then the Lord provided an opportunity when they sold that asset to move here. And the 18 months I spent here, I made a lot of just really great connections, plugged into the Vineyard, really loved the church and the people. And so we were really, really happy that the Lord gave us the opportunity to come back to Wellsboro. In Bradford, we attended a very small church in the middle of nowhere, right over the border in Limestone. It was a Pentecostal church. They love Jesus. They still are singing the same songs in a Papa time that they sang back then.
I grew up with that.
Yeah, not a lot of hymns, a lot of choruses, a lot of really great stuff from the Statler brothers and Billy or the Gaithers. A lot of the Gaithers. My mom was the youth pastor, so
cool.
Yeah, so I kind of grew up in, not kind of, did grow up in church, and it was, I remember being 14 or 15 and just going, God, it would have been just so easy if I hadn't had all this, because I know all the answers now. Of course, 14, you think you know all the answers. You may not, but the whole point was, I was like, I don't feel like I can do anything because I've got this box around me. And that was one of the things. Colleen and I decided to leave that church because of that box. They didn't want to leave their box. Yeah. And we went to another church. And I think that was one of the reasons why the Lord led us to Newcastle, was we learned a lot about missions and the church that God just put us in, and the people were like, hello, crisis, and just took us in, and everybody was amazing. And we just learned, we went from a church that was so internally focused that the neighbors knew there was a church there, but didn't know anybody that was there, to a church that was on the streets, walking around praying, and on the main street at New Year's doing a big Christmas, or just before Christmas, doing a big Christmas thing. They were in the community. Pastor Check that was his thing. He was a youth pastor that got shanghaied into being a senior pastor, and he never forgot his youth pastor roots. But that's kind of my faith journey. When I was younger, I was, because I lived that sheltered life, when I finally got out of my parents' house, I did the typical, hey, there's drugs and booze and crazy things in this world. And I kind of partook of all of them for a few years. But the Lord was gracious, and he answered the prayers of a mother and brought me back. And that was good.
That's actually really encouraging to me as a mother.
Yeah. I pray for my boy every day. I know that he's out in Elder doing his thing, and banking on the fact that we raised him the way that God would want him raised, and I'm hoping he doesn't forget about that. So right. Yeah.
So you and Colleen, did you grow up together?
So Colleen is a little, so she's 7 years younger than I am.
Okay.
And so I actually worked for her dad, and my mother actually was their baby. She was the secretary, and she babysat Colleen and her two sisters quite a bit.
Is that right? So, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was a little weird talking about any of that stuff.
I'll just tell you this right now, that my dad was my mom's high school band director. So talk about weird. Yeah. I get it.
Yeah. It always, Colleen loves to bring it up because it brings a smile to her face, but it always makes me feel a little uncomfortable, but it is what it is. But yeah, her family moved into Bradford when she was 3 or 4 from the Rochester area.
Cool. And when do you remember getting saved? Do you remember asking Jesus into your heart?
I think I did it a few times.
Yeah.
Growing up in church, that, hey, let's go to the altar and do the thing again, So, but I do remember I was in my living room. 63 miners had just left the house, accompanied by 6 police officers. And I was about 2 weeks from turning 21, and I just felt the Holy Spirit say, it's time to grow up. Wow. And so I was like, okay. And from that point on, I didn't do drugs anymore. I didn't drink anymore. And I just, it's one of those deal moments.
Yeah.
It was so palatable. The Holy Spirit it was like I was super high and then I was stone cold sober. And then you realize the fact that being high is just a really poor substitute for the Holy Spirit. So yeah. Good life lessons. Regrets, yes, but it's the foundation stuff that makes you who you are.
Yeah. And we don't, we can't live in those regrets, and that keeps us from the realization too of how fully his we are, and how fully forgiven we are. So yeah, that's good. Wow. So I was trying to think too, and you kind of alluded to this a little bit, but so when did you very first come to the Vineyard in Wellsboro?
So when I came here, the first couple of week on, week off deals, I was here for a week. I would did some church shopping for maybe a month, and I was working heavily in the Liberty area, and so I went to a few churches over there, and some of them nice people, just very this is my pew people, and you're here, glad you're here, you're one of those gas guys, you're going to move on, and so we don't want to invest in you. That was the feeling I got. And so it was a little discouraging. And so I did 3 or 4 churches, decided to stay in Wellsboro the next couple of hitches. And so I was looking for churches there. Coming from a Pentecostal background, I had some things that I was looking for. And so there were some churches that it was just, their theology just wasn't for me. And so, I actually talked to a few of the pastors, though, because you never know. Pastor Chuck was a Free Methodist, but man, the Holy Spirit blew through their church. And so, and they didn't care. And so I always did ask. I didn't want to just assume, hey, you're a Baptist preacher. So, you ask a few questions, and when the answer is what you expected is, then you say, okay, well, thanks, but I'm going to go find the people I'm looking for. I was in Bradford. I was getting ready for my next hitch. I was on the internet looking for a church, because it really is important when you're in a different community, because when you're working a 12-hour shift, you have the rest of that time to do what? In a small town, especially, not a whole lot. And so trying to, find things like men's groups and, people to just hang out and play music with in the lobby. We did that a lot at Penwells. But searched up the internet looking for just what churches were there, and the Vineyard caught my eye. I went to their website. I said this before. The website they did have one, but it was horrible. But that,
I just want to stop you for a second, because that is literally the thing that I have heard over and over and over. And that was our experience too. Was it like, I found the website. We were amazed that they had a website, because not everybody did back in the day, but it was not a great website, but it was enough that it got us there. And that's so funny.
Right. Yeah. And so that was it. I came, it was at First Presbyterian. John Fraley was ripping up on the guitar, and your husband was on the drums, and Bob was on the bass, and it was awesome. And Bob was preaching, and there was actually he was things I'd never heard. I knew all the answers, but he was preaching about stuff I'd never heard. And so I loved that. And so the balance for me, balance and feedback, it's got to be balanced. And those are my 2 mantra words. We're not going to talk about that, but anyways, it was balanced. And so that's what I was all about.
Actually, I don't mind taking some little time to talk about that if you want to.
Well,
no, I'm curious about that now.
Well, so when I'm dealing with anything, when I've learned, now that I've got this gray, even though I'm not old, but I'm gray now, that for me, I find that everything comes down to balance and feedback. And so if I find that there's something that I'm looking for, it's a balance thing. And I used to use the word communication, but communication can sometimes only go one way.
Yep.
But feedback comes back this way. or back that way. And so if somebody may communicate something to me, and if I don't feed back to them, well, then nothing's going to change. And it works the other way as well. So it's kind of why I've settled on balance and feedback whenever I'm dealing with an issue. That always seems to be the root cause of the problem. Something's out of balance, or there's a communication feedback issue. So that's the balance and feedback thing.
I love that. I thank you for sharing that. And actually, I feel like that leads a little bit into the next thing I wanted to kind of talk about, which is just, all of those Vineyard distinctives or catchphrases, and there's a little list there. And I feel like that kind of talks about I've talked in some of the other podcasts, and I think about this a lot, which is just that holding things in tension, which I think is the same kind of thing that you're talking about with being balanced.
Yes.
And not just like being all one way or all another way, but being able to kind of hold those things in tension. Is that along the lines of what you were talking about?
Absolutely. It fits right in.
So then
I never heard,
I
never heard any. Yeah. And that was one of the things about coming to the Vineyard that I love that authenticity of those things. Wimber's was amazing. We're going to talk about books, and one of his books will definitely come out, but just those Vineyard distinctives. This is what makes us who we are. It's very authentic, very down to earth. That's the kind of guy I am. But there was still, there's always Christian lingo, right?
Yep.
And so even in the Vineyard, there's a lot of that lingo, but it's really down to earth stuff. And so that's why I really, I do enjoy all of them. And I always love in the past episodes, listening to what really touch people and what they really connect with. For me, it wasn't a surprise. For most of the people, I kind of, you kind of know them. If you know them, you kind of know what their Vineyard distinctive, what's really going to touch them. But for me, one of the things that has always drawn me to the Vineyard and has always really been special to me is the fact that they are a planting movement. That is missions. People is my passion. I love people. And so Jesus is just that way to love people. And planting churches is, I have been for years just trying to be as well-rounded as I can be, so that someday God can say, I'm hoping, if it's in his plan, to say, go help these people plant a church.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that was on your heart.
Absolutely. I would love to. That's why you see me doing sound and on the worship team. And I want to know how to do all that stuff. And it's not because I want to be seen doing all the stuff, because sometimes I don't want to do all the stuff, but I really do enjoy it. But I really want to know how to do all of it, so that in a church planting situation, I can say, yeah, I know enough about that to get in trouble. So,
well, that's fantastic. I really love that. And I didn't know that was something that was on your
heart. That really endeared me to the Vineyard. That was something, even at the conferences, you always hear about that stuff. I'm like, yes, this is good stuff. And on the Vineyard USA website, they're always really, showing people that they're releasing out into the communities and the releasing churches. And it's like, that's so hard for both sides. I mean, you're like, okay, here's some of our best people, go away and no longer be part of our congregation. And it's so hard for both sides.
Well, this can actually lead also right into talking about some podcasts.
Absolutely.
Do you listen to the Multiply Vineyard podcast?
I do. Yes, absolutely.
That is one of my favorite ones. I think the host is Michael Gatlin.
Gatlin.
Yeah, and
yes.
He just seems like such a great guy. I'm a little jealous that Carson is going to be able to go out and spend time. I think that's the church he's
fantastic
for next year. But he seems like such a cool guy, such a wonderful leader, and I just love hearing the stories of church planters and what they've done. And it's amazing that church planting has not stopped during COVID. People are continuing to go out and, try new things and do new models and all of this kind of stuff. And it's just really cool to listen to. That's one of my absolute favorite podcasts. Do you have any podcasts you'd like to share?
Well, that one is a great one. And if you're interested in church planting with the Vineyard, the 4th and 5th of February, they're doing their meet, their yearly meet, and it's online this year. And so I highly recommend checking that out. Some amazing speakers. They've got Rick Warren this year from Saddleback. Yeah, Rick Warren's going to be their headline speaker, and he's such a great speaker, which his podcast is one of the ones I listen to. Rick Warren's podcasts are great.
What's it called?
It's, if you just go to the I usually have apps. The apps that I have, the Rick Warren app, the other one is Chip Ingram. They have their own apps. And so you just, because a lot of times you hear, I drive a lot for work. And so you hear them on the radio, and they've got this much of that sermon. Yeah. And you can get on the app and listen to the other 3 hours of the more in-depth stuff that they do for the sermon, for Rick especially.
So do you listen to podcasts through just individual apps, or do you listen to them? Do you have like a server that you use?
Well, so for those two, I use the apps. And then for, there's one, it's called Dad Tired. I usually use Stitcher for the most part because I don't have an iPhone. Okay. Back when I had an iPhone, I used the Apple podcast. Yeah. But since I don't have an iPhone, it's funky if you don't have iOS. So I use Stitcher. But there's a really, really great podcast called Dad Tired, and a friend of mine, his name's Josh Hatcher. He's from Bradford. He's into media. That's what he does. He's a graphic designer. He has a website, Facebook page, Manlyhood, and it's all about non-toxic manlyhood, how to be a man in this day and age and actually, not be toxic. And so
that's sometimes
cool. It's very cool. He's a great guy, and one of the people that one of the podcasts that he also recommended was this Dad Tired. And it's the podcast is just about equipping men to be just how to lead your family well. Yeah. And there's lots of great content in there. Man, so those are some of my favorite apps. I like the mix, the balance, if you will, of teaching and of maybe just life experience stuff. Yeah. So there's a little bit of that in there.
Yeah, that's so cool. I don't know how long I've been listening to podcasts now, a couple years, but I feel like most things in my life, once I discover something new, I'm like all 150% in. So sure. I am always collecting new podcasts, and I do not have enough time in my life to listen to all the podcasts that I have. Yeah. So it's really hard to kind of narrow down what I'm going to listen to when, and I have to continually call them a little bit so that I have room on my phone because otherwise it'll say like you're running out of memory, and right. And I know you can keep them in there. I listen to all mine through the Apple Podcast app. So but those are great ones. Another one of mine, and you might like this one too, is the Ferment Podcast.
I forgot about the Ferment because they haven't been doing any new ones. They
are now.
Are they now? Great. Yep. That's great.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of them out there.
And I feel like every single one, this happens so much on some of my podcasts, and Ferment is definitely one of them. So he'll have a guest on, and then that guest has a podcast, and I'm like, ooh, that sounds really good. I want to listen to that one. So then that starts me on another one. So then it's like this web of just ending up with all these different podcasts.
The black hole of podcasts.
Yes. But for anyone who doesn't know, and just to kind of give a little review on it, the Ferment Podcast is a Vineyard podcast. The host is Adam Russell, who is a pastor and worship leader. He's the head of worship for the Vineyard.
He is the head of Vineyard Worship now. Yep.
And so a lot of the podcasts are kind of worship focused, but if you're, if someone listening is not on the worship team, I would still direct you to this podcast because it's not technical worship stuff. It's for everybody. Like I feel like you could just be a Christian and listen to it.
Yeah. Tons of life experience stuff in there.
Or not be a Christian and still listen to it because it's still awesome.
Yeah. And I love the fact that a lot of these podcasts, because like I said earlier, I like to watch them.
Yeah.
You can YouTube, they are all now cataloging them on YouTube, which makes it very convenient because now you can see what you've watched. And since I don't usually use a conventional podcast platform, YouTube makes it really easy. And I believe you guys are even doing this with, we're doing that with these videos.
Yep, we are.
We're on the Fulcrum.
Yeah, so if you want to check out this podcast on YouTube, if you prefer to watch them, we've been posting them on there. We have a playlist that's just for the podcast, and you can go to Vineyard Church of Wellsboro YouTube page and find all of those. So yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I don't think I've watched any podcasts. I just listened to them. And I think that you actually mentioned that before we started recording. So just for people who didn't hear that, Dan likes to watch them on YouTube. He prefers it.
I prefer to, I am a visual person. I prefer to be able to see all those micro expressions, all those things that you miss with just voice.
Yeah.
And I also, unlike Carolyn, have to focus. I can't be multitasking. I can't be doing dishes and listen to a podcast because I'll stop doing dishes and listen to the podcast, or I'll be doing dishes and not hear the podcast. I just can't multitask. I have to be kind of all in when I'm doing that. And so that's why I do it when I'm driving.
Yeah.
And only when I'm driving, because I get distracted. I'm like, oh, there's an instrument and I should go pick up that instrument and play it. And now the podcast is gone. It doesn't keep it's just my personal affliction with just auditory.
Well, that's so funny. I have two comments on that. One is driving. Of course, I love to listen to things when I'm driving, but that is the only time I've actually gotten in trouble listening to things is a couple times I was listening to something, books, I think, audiobooks, and it was so intense and I was so into it that I missed my exit.
Oh yeah.
Now that was back in the days before Google Maps would pop in and say, take this turn or whatever.
You did the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Sure.
So it was when I was just having to watch for things myself. So I'm grateful now that they interrupt the story to tell me where I need to go. But that's the one time I got in trouble for that, for sure, with that. And then had to go, drive 10 miles to the next exit and turn around and come back. The other thing, now I totally forgot what the other thing was I was going to say about that. Well, maybe we can just transition to talking about audiobooks. Are you an audiobook listener or no?
I am not.
For the same reason? For the
exact same reason. I just want to, and I enjoy digital books. I'm so grateful for Amazon, the fact I can get on and just pay whatever it is, $12 a month, and I can just pull up an author and just consume what he has on there for that monthly fee. And I don't have to have 80 bookshelves in my house. So if you look at Michael Gatlin and any of his podcasts, all those bookshelves behind him are full. Yes. And I know he's read them all. Yeah. And so it's really nice audiobooks are great if you have that temperament and can actually concentrate on the book and what you're doing. I unfortunately do not. But it is a nice media, the fact that we can do all this stuff digitally, and especially if you don't have the place to store all these physical books.
Yeah. It's so funny. So I actually appreciate that we're different in this way because it's fun to talk about the differences. I can't stand reading something digital. Like if I'm going to read an actual book, I need like the paper of it. It's something, it's so visceral for me, like the smell of it, the feel of it, being able to write in it. I still have these memories from high school. So when I was my senior year of high school, my English class, we had a smallish English class and we did Hamlet, and the school was about to get a new set of books. So they actually gave us the books to keep It wasn't just like lent to us by the school and then we had to return it. So we were allowed to write in them and make notes. And I had never had that experience with a book before other than the Bible. And I actually feel like it was a real eye-opening experience for me, even that I was able to translate to my Bible, but also that I was able to translate to textbooks in college, that I was able to translate to any book that I read now, is like taking that kind of personal ownership and connection with a book and writing in it. And it almost becomes like a journal, because if I look back through it, certainly in my Bible, but even in other books that I've read more than once, if I look back through and you see things that you've highlighted or underlined or wrote a little note by, it takes you to certain times in your life. And I don't know, I feel like it's almost like a journal or a diary. And so I know that they've made digital ways that you can do that.
Sure. Annotation devices. And,
right. Like in Kindle or the Kindle app or like whatever. But it's just not the same.
Sure.
And there's something about, and I will say, I don't have a device that I can use an actual like smart pencil or something to write in. I know they do make those now, and I don't know if that would change anything for me. I don't think it would.
I don't think it probably would.
But so for me, I feel like it's either an audiobook or it's the actual hard copy book, not a digital copy. But that being said, if I listen to an audiobook, which I try to listen to most things on audiobook that are available, and it's such a fantastic book, then I also buy a hard copy.
Go out and buy the hard copy, sure. So, no, absolutely. So I did that in VI a lot.
Yes.
When we were in VI, we had to read a lot of books, and they had a lot of, they were expensive. And at the time, paying for Vineyard Institute, and living life, it was like, wow. But there, like you said, there were some books that was just like, yeah, I want to copy this on my shelf, even though I did all my studies off the digital copy.
Yeah. And that is one time when I did buy some digital copies, and the one thing I appreciated about that was that you could search for a term. So like if you wanted to read everything about kingdom theology, for example, or that would be a whole book in and of itself. But if you were looking for a specific content or a specific verse or a specific something, it would then show you all the places that those were found, and I did appreciate that. So, and for anyone listening, Dan mentioned Vineyard Institute, which is kind of within the Vineyard framework. And Vineyard is an international organization, just to be clear about that. It's called Vineyard Institute, and it is, I don't want to oversell it as like the seminary of the vineyard, but that's kind of basically what it is. Yeah.
At the root of it, that's kind of what it is. It's just big, full of just great classes and they're real down to earth, other than Morphew. They're real down to earth, real authentic people, just being like, look, these are some of the things in your ministry you're going to run into, and here's some of the ways that I've dealt with it, and just really solid stuff, really great stuff.
I feel like the Vineyard, again, holding those things in tension, does a really good job of spanning that spectrum of super deep theology. So it's not like just surfacey stuff. It's very deep theology, but also with super real life practical application. And so we take all of this intense study, and how does that look in real life then? So they don't leave it just there, but they also aren't just like, here are 5 things to make your sermon great, necessarily. So I think it's kind of, again, holding those things in tension. But I have a couple books. I have one book right now that I'd like to share. That is, so this book, Live in Grace, Walk in Love, Bob Goff. And hey, it's fading into your background, Dan. Hold it in front of your face. There you go. That's fantastic. So Bob Goff is amazing. Oh my gosh. I would love to meet him in person. He seems like such a fun guy. I know I could call him. He puts his cell phone number in Love Does, I think. And you can actually literally call him and he will answer. But I feel like, I don't know what I would say other than like fangirl, like, hi, you're so cool. But this is, I think I don't know what number it is, 3rd book. I don't know. Maybe he's written more that I don't know about. But this one is kind of a meant to be like a daily devotional. It's got 300 and I don't know if, so it looks backwards to me. I don't know if when they see this on YouTube, if it will look backwards or not, but
I can see it
you can
the
see
right
it
way. So,
all right, well, hopefully that's the case then. But this is one that I listened to, and then and I just listened to it even after I realized it was a devotional. I was like, oh, that's all right, it's still good, I'll just keep listening to it. So I listened to it straight through, just like I would any book. And then I thought, that's so good, like I've got to get that one in hard copy. So I got the hard copy of it. And but interestingly, as a family, we have been going through this, but the audio version. So when we have we typically try to eat breakfast as a family together, and we play one of them at breakfast when we're together. But this is a wonderful one. Nice. I just wanted to share with people that I would highly recommend, especially as we're starting off this new year. This is a great, if you're looking for a devotional, Live in Grace, Walk in Love is a fantastic option.
Yeah. So normally my daily devotional is My Utmost for His Highest. And that is Oswald.
Yep.
Right?
Chambers. Oswald Chambers.
Oswald Chambers. Yeah. Sorry, name.
That's
Anyways,
right. That's name.
Oswald Chambers. My Utmost for His Highest. Fantastic devotion. That's the one I every year. And it's funny. I'll just like send screenshots to guys that a couple years ago we sent the same screenshots and just things that are still relevant. And the thing was written a long time ago. I'm not sure when, but when we made a trip to Hobby Lobby. Hobby Lobby's got some great books if you're into hard copies, and that's where I got this one and some other really great books. So yeah, plug for Hobby Lobby, because they do have when you first walk in the door, that's one of the first things you see is a little kiosk of really great books.
Awesome. The only other audiobook that I wanted to share today that I'm just finishing up is called The Liturgy of the Ordinary by Tish Harrison Warren. And it talks about how, liturgy sounds like such a big fancy word, and it often refers to the specific things that you do within a church service. But she kind of is talking about how the things we do in our daily life are our personal liturgy, and how they can be super spiritual, even like, the simplest things like washing the dishes or caring for our bodies, things like that. Like those things are important to God too. And it depends on the view that we take of them and how we can honor God in all of those little things. And it's really good. It's definitely a thinker. It's not super deep, but I feel like it's like, I never really thought of looking at things really quite in that way. So I'm enjoying that.
Yeah. When you hear words like liturgy, for me and the way I was raised, it's like, no, we don't, that's all tradition stuff. But as you get into books like that, you realize that maybe there's more side, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? There is some good stuff that you can still get from that. Just don't take it too far, right? Don't be a Pharisee about it. So I when Mike O'Brien came, he introduced a few things to me that really started me down that path of thinking, maybe this stuff isn't so bad. I want to be balanced though. I want to be balanced, but maybe it's not so bad.
Yeah. And I feel like, so I grew up in a very similar situation to you. Like we didn't have anything that was like, things that we repeated every week or things that we would sometimes read scripture together aloud as a church occasionally. And of course we did communion, but we didn't have recited prayers or anything like that. And so in fact, the sense, well, it wasn't overt, but the sense was we don't want any of that because it's just going through the motions and it's not authentic. And that was the sense that came with it. And I feel like in recent years, for me, I've become more curious about those things and have started digging into them a little bit more. And I think, like you said, it's all about balance. And I think if you grew up in a church doing those things all the time and just not even paying attention and thinking about them, then they're not really super useful. But, anything is really liturgy. I mean, we have our own liturgy within the Vineyard, even if we're not saying any recited prayers. And even the church I grew up in had its own liturgy. It's really just the things that you do in the service, So it's interesting to think about that. And I have a few more things to say about that, but I was wondering, do you have any, you mentioned a couple of apps. So you mentioned what, the Rick Warren app?
Yep, the Rick Warren app, and then the Chip Ingram app. And they, if you like their style of preaching, and that's what drew me to their apps. I enjoy their style of preaching. It's not everybody's cup of tea. I know some folks, oh yeah, I don't do the whole circle and underline. I don't like that.
Oh, yeah.
And that's okay, you know. But I like that style of teaching. I relate well to it, and so I like listening to their podcast through their apps. And some of the other things that online, if we're going to talk about online media, another media is music.
Yeah.
And so for me, I love music. If you know me, I'm kind of into music. And I'm into all kinds of music, but when it comes to utilizing media for music, being a night church at the Vineyard, we meet at 6:00. It gives me the opportunity, especially now, but I've been doing it for years because people have been offering their services online for quite some time. And so I have been just slowly gathering different live streams. And so in the morning, starting around 10 to 9, my phone starts dinging, and different churches all over the country, I can live stream.
That's
and
fantastic.
So I can, and a lot of them are staggered, so it works. So I can hear the songs, I can hear different songs, I can hear what different churches are doing, I can hear how their congregations are relating to those songs. You know, oh wow, that church is digging that song, and the Holy Spirit is moving in that place right now. It's coming into my kitchen. And so stuff like that is really cool. And so there's where, you know, new songs, and hey, I've never heard this song before, or I was listening a couple weeks ago to the Vineyard Church in Maine, in Mechanicsburg, and I can't think of his name right now, but Mike Lyle was doing a Vineyard song that was on the Soul album, and it's a great album, but when you think of these songs congregationally, I was like, I don't know if that would be a great, and he sang it. I went, oh my goodness, I was getting goosebumps, and I was like, Colleen, oh my goodness, this is so good. I even posted it on the Vineyard worship team Facebook page and said, this song was fire this morning. And so just it's been a really great outlet for me to be able to hear other sermons and hear other streams of music that's not specifically what we always listen to,
right?
And but the basis of it is, what are people connecting to? What songs are people, what's hitting home?
Yeah.
And it's fun. It's also really awesome watching a church in Maine and a church in Key West, Florida, and a church in Shingle House, Pennsylvania, and how a lot of times the sermons and the songs and the message that God is pumping out across the country is the same. Wow. It's really, really awesome.
So do you watch them simultaneously?
No.
Oh, okay.
No,
I'm trying to imagine how this would happen.
No. So like the Vineyard Church in the Florida Keys has 3 services.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of them have different services, couple different services, couple different live streams. And unfortunately, you get the ding every time they come on, but you're like, oh no, I already watched you guys. I watched you guys at 9. And, some days we'll watch 3 or 4 different services.
Wow.
And it's just a nice way to relax in the morning, drinking coffee.
Yeah.
Watching outside. Cool. Yeah. So that's just another way that I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you say another way. Go ahead.
It's just another way to, for me, that I get another form of media with the music.
Yeah. So do you feel like that's the main way that you hear new songs, or the way
absolutely.
that you get? Is that right? That's so interesting. Because like my husband really likes to look at new albums that are coming out, and like he's a great one for new albums. So like listen to the new album, and he listens to it and listens to it and listens to it over and over and over and over again, until he really like, you know, engages the songs and knows the songs and stuff, and makes me a little crazy. But it's actually good for me too, because I don't come to new music real easily. I kind of have to I ease my way into new music. I'm not super quick to be like, that's it. I want that. You know, if I don't know the song. It's only happened a couple of times. I remember, I think it was a Vineyard conference several years ago now, where they played The Great I Am. And that was one where as we were singing it, I was like, oh, this is one.
Oh yeah, we did that Sunday.
Yeah, it was the first time I had heard it.
A lot of times Colleen will also be a feed for new music. She listens to a lot of different stuff as well, and it's funny, most of the time I know I'm gonna like a song if I don't like it off the bat. It's one of those songs that has to grow on me. And the ones, typical Colleen, I love her, but it's like, no, I'm not a big fan. But the more I listen to it, because for Colleen, she looks at it, she's looking at the lyrics, she's looking at the theology, and for me, I'm listening. Unfortunately, it's just one of my flaws. I'm a musician first, and someone who looks at the theology second, and Colleen's the opposite. She's always like, oh, and she's really relating to the lyrics and the theology. And I'm like, oh, did you hear that drum fill? And she's like, you're missing it.
You know, I don't think that's a flaw though. I feel like, again, it's a balance. And I feel like we need people who hear both things, you know, we help to balance each other out. And, you know, for some people too, it is the actual music of something that draws you in, and the Lord uses that to speak to us in that way. It's not just the lyrics. I mean, I feel like I've had spiritual experiences listening to songs with no lyrics. So yeah, anyway, so that's really cool to hear those different ways that you listen to music and find new things. Do you always watch Vineyard services, or
no.
Yeah.
No. So there's two churches specifically that are Vineyard. The church in Mechanicsburg, which is in Maine, and then the church in the Vineyard Keys. We have some friends that I used to play bluegrass music with when they were kids.
Yeah.
They were the bluegrass band. There was I believe 10 of them. They were the Dorfels, and she married the oldest girl in the Dorfel family, married Doug Lawls, who is Steve Lawls' son. He's the pastor, and Doug leads the worship at the Florida Keys Vineyard. So that's the kind of connection there, how that kind of all panned out. So small world, right? And it's even smaller now thanks to technology. And so
so I'm just curious, what are some of the ones that you listen to that are not Vineyard?
One of the churches is it's Colleen's cousin. They're a campus church. They've got their main church is in Wellsville, New York, and Tim's campus is in Shingle House, and then they've got 4 or 5 other campuses, and they're a Christian Missionary Alliance church, CMA church, and they being a campus, you know, being church planners, really, and the fact that, you know, I started watching this because we were watching Tim. Hey, look, there's Tim playing and seeing that connection. But they really do have a fantastic heart for the Lord, and they love to plant churches, and so that's pretty awesome. So that's their CMA. I watch the church that we're part of in Newcastle. They're Free Methodists, and their guitar players, so good. Brandon, he gets the tone. He's all about the tone, and he's got he can talk pedals all day long. Yeah, great guy.
That's so funny. I've listened to a number of different services from time to time, although I do mine all through podcasts. I don't live stream them at the time. But the one that I most consistently listen to that's not a Vineyard, in fact, I listen to it probably most consistently anyway, although I do listen to some other vineyards, is one in Denver. So when we lived in Colorado Springs, we went to a really big church, and we went to a really tiny church there. The little tiny church is not there anymore. But the really big church ended up sending out this pastor. He used to be the Saturday night service pastor. And when we were connected with the little tiny church, you know what it's like to be in a little tiny church. It's a lot of work.
Oh, yeah.
And so sometimes we just wanted to go somewhere where nobody knew our name.
Right.
And we could just go to the service. And so we would often go to the Saturday night service of this big church. And this guy, Rob Brendel, was the pastor of the Saturday night service. And then, gosh, I don't know how many years ago it is now, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, he was sent out. I guess it's sort of a church plant, although not quite. It didn't quite go down like that, but it was certainly supported, and he lovingly sent. It wasn't we're leaving, and started this church in Denver. And I've always loved it's fine. I've always loved his preaching style, and I've always gotten so much out of his sermons, and so I listen to him a lot. But anyway, yeah.
Awesome.
So was there anything else, any other media that you wanted to share today with us? Okay, awesome.
We got to talk about printed books.
Yes, definitely.
Yes. So this is, I wasn't kidding. When we went to Hobby Lobby, my filter thing, I picked up a whole pile of books. Colleen and I were going to go reading, little down to Cafe 1905 and just sit and read. And she'd probably crochet, and I wanted to read, and I forgot my book at the house, and so I was like, it's okay, we'll just go to the bookstore. And so we went from my shelf, and I'll just get some more books. And so I stumbled on to this one, and I'm as you can tell by my little straw bookmarker, this is the Surprised by Joy. I love autobiographies, and this is C.S. Lewis's biography.
Yes.
And it is autobiography. And I had never even seen this before. And so when I went to Hobby Lobby, I ended up getting the Screw Tape Letters and some other C.S. Lewis books. But this book has been, like I said, I'm only 30 pages into it, but it's been really good 30 pages. And it's kind of hard to read, of course, because it's C.S. Lewis, and it's got some old English action going on it. It's very, very dense. This is the Passion Translation of the Bible, and I am eating this guy up. So this book, one of the things I always want to share about books is, I guess, to answer that last question, one of those things that I always want to talk about when it comes to all this stuff. I've heard it a couple different places, especially in Vineyard Institute. But I'll never forget, Colleen and I went to Maine for a marriage encounter some years ago, and Dick Ray was one of the presenting couples at Marriage Encounter. And if you'd never heard of Marriage Encounter, the Vineyard, before COVID, we were doing this awesome weekend where couples got to just get together, go someplace without their kids, and hang out with other people and hear their stories and hear their authentic, wide open, no holds barred, nothing under the blanket, all out there stories. And
very raw,
very, very emotional, and very, I'm just, it's an amazing weekend, and hopefully we get to do them again. But the big thing is you're putting some toolboxes into your marriage toolbox. You're putting some tools in your marriage toolbox. And anyways, Dick Ray was one of the presenting couples at this marriage encounter, and he was talking about just his love for information, and how the fact that when I read this stuff, and before that, I kind of think I was in this boat. I was reading for information. Mm-hmm. I was not reading for formation or transformation. And that was one of the things that Dick Ray said. He goes, "Are you reading for formation? information, or are you reading for formation? And
Wow.
this Passion translation of the Bible it's really, I love reading things, the Bible, especially when you read the Bible, it's something new every time. And to be able to grab a new translation, that Passion, I'm all about passion. And this was a gift from a really cool guy. And I was really appreciative of it. And I'm in Luke now, because this is just the New Testament with Psalms, Proverbs, and Song of Solomon. And so I started this month with just reading through Luke, and oh my goodness. Oh, it's so good. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah. So grab a different, if you're always reading NIV or you're always reading King James, grab a different translation and see if there's something in there. Grab an ESV, grab NTSB, grab something that's maybe a little more modern, and see if there's something that says to you something new that the Holy Spirit can use. But you're looking at it for formational reasons, not just to read it, not just for information.
That's really good. I grew up with an NASB. That's what our church used all growing up. And so that's how I have any verses that I have memorized or that I've heard. That's how it is in my head. And I've decided that, like, my old Bible, I have many Bibles, but I've decided, like, I keep coming back to that old Bible, but I decided, like, it's really time for me to, like, have a new Bible that I'm kind of pushing into in a new way. And I've discovered, I would love that. I'm very now inspired to get the Passion Translation, actually, with you talking about that. I've seen,
very, very good.
I look it up on Bible Gateway and stuff like that. So I've seen some of the verses. But I will say, so years ago, my dad had given me a Bible that is the New Spirit-filled Bible. Are you familiar with this one at all?
I don't think so.
And it was the New King James Version, which is all that it was available in for a while, because it has a lot of Strong's reference and stuff, information in it. But they just recently came out with the NIV of it and the TPT. No, not TPT. Sorry, I'm thinking of the Passion. It's another one. I can't think of it. NLT, maybe? I don't know. But I just got, so this is just an NIV, so it's not any fancy new translation, but it is the New Spirit-Filled Life Bible. And that
does look familiar.
I really love all of the study components that are in this. And then I like the New King James, and that was good. I will say personally, I don't love a hardback book. I much prefer a soft cover book, because I don't know, just something about how it lays and how I guess I'm rough on them. I always end up breaking the bindings of hardcover books that I'm actually reading with any kind of intensity. And I don't like to feel like I have to be careful. I don't know. Maybe I'm super rough on books. I don't know. But so my New King James version of this is a hardback, and I have broken the binding on it. And so I decided that I would like an NIV. So I just got this within the last week. So it's so clean and fresh and new.
Ready for some scribbles.
Yes.
Highlighters.
Yes. So I'm excited about that too. But I think the study components for it are really, really fantastic.
Yeah, I think that does look familiar. I think we actually Colleen and I both had one of those some years ago.
Yeah.
And I think, like 3/4 of it's the scripture, and then there's this big giant block about
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And each, like, there's such a wonderful, before each book of the Bible, it has like a really wonderful background. At the end of each one, it has like a truth in action and how you see Jesus and how you see the Spirit moving through this book and each story. And there's like little things plopped in here and there too about it. I really, really like it. Did you have any other books you wanted to share?
Not really.
That's okay.
Well, so no, it's okay. It's just like the music thing, right? Brett just uses seasons.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, just use this reference in Sunday sermon about seasons. And so there's some seasons where I will read nothing but the Bible. and just go over, like I said, I'm in Luke, and then I'll be reading Bob Goff in the this Living Grace, and next year I might do it again. Next year I might pick up. Those are the standard ones, and then the other books that I'm reading, because I do read a lot. I do read a lot of books that aren't spiritual as well. I love space operas. I love pirates in outer space and the future books. Don't ask me why. I'm
glad there's people
think
who do.
I know why, because I like to consume large series, and they always have 15, 20 book series of 300-page books, and I can read one of those books in an hour. So it's like, I think I really like them. Because of that. Yeah. So,
I think,
but anyways, in those seasons, I went through a really large season of leadership books. John C. Maxwell. I read a ton of John C. Maxwell. I read, there was a series called the 33 series. And I think it was written as a men's group, the 33 Years of Jesus.
Okay.
And I went, that was really it was full of great leadership things. Randy Alcorn, Dave Ramsey, different aspects of things, but all still based on leadership. The devotions, Reading for Joy, Love Does, Everyone Always, Bob Goff. I go back to Bob Goff. He just put one out in 2020 called Dream Big. I've yet to read Dream Big, but I'll be reading that one soon. But when I need books for joy, I always seem to go back to things like Bob Goff. And so yeah, absolutely. And so it's all about the season for me. I think just like with music right now, I'm in a big, you can ask Colleen, I put Pandora jazz on all the time. I don't know where that came from. I'm in a jazz mood right now. And sometimes it'll be 80s Christian rock. And I don't know where that came. Well, I grew up with that, but but for some, it's just like that with this printed medium, with the podcast and stuff like that. I think God knows what I need and puts it right in front of me when I need it. And so, yeah.
And I think, so this is one of the reasons I wanted to do this too, is because I think you have the type of personality and I have the type of personality that we kind of, our eyes are always open for this sort of stuff, and we kind of, really go after it and consume it. And not everybody does, not everyone has maybe just the inclination or the drive to do that, but it doesn't mean that they don't want good resources. And so I love hearing what other people are reading and think, oh, that sounds really good. I should listen to that or read that or, whatever. So that's what I wanted to kind of do this for. I have a couple other things I want to share real quick that have been good. And talking about seasons, I have, other than audiobooks, which is the primary way that I read these days, I haven't read a lot in like actual books, other than things like a devotional or the Bible or something like the next book I'm going to share, that you can just read a little bit of it and then close it. It's not like you're immersed in a story, because I do have a hard time pulling myself out sometimes back to my real life, because I get so engaged. If it's a good book, I get so engaged in the characters and the story. And there have been a couple series where at the end I had to like kind of go through a withdrawal process to get kind of back to, okay, I'm not like, those characters are not real people, and I need to like get back to the real life that I live. Anyway, so I have some issues with things like that, but as part of my own personal spiritual formation practices that I'm working on right now, learning to Sabbath well. And I'm learning, and I've chosen Monday as my Sabbath, and investing in soul care time during that day. One of my practices that I've literally just started is reading an actual book, working on reading an actual book. So I'm excited about that. That's not just a daily or a, chunk by chunk kind of book.
Sure.
But so a couple things I've read recently that I'd like to just quickly share and been using is this praying the scriptures for your teens.
Oh yeah.
and they have one of these for your kids. They have a bunch of different ones of these. But this one has been very timely for me right now, since I have 5 teens and 2 preteens. And so this has been really good. There's a lot of really good prayers. And sometimes I feel like just getting a little different spin on a prayer, that I feel like I'm just saying the same thing all the time, just getting some different perspectives, some different scriptures, stories. I don't know. So this has been good for me in that way.
Very good book. We have the one for the adult children.
Oh, okay. Yes. I'm sure
children.
that will probably be the next one in that series that I buy.
Yep.
This is not actually something I've been reading, but something I would like to share. So this company, Loom Journals, and I think they've just joined with another organization called Promptly. But I think if you look up Loom Journal, you can find them. They have a bunch of different products, but the 2 that I have been using that I like so much are a parent-child journal. And so it goes through, I'm not going to show you anything that's actually written, but, and they'll have, let's see. So they'll have 2 pages, and they have like roughly the same questions. They're mostly the same. And like the parent writes their answers to these questions, and then the child, you give it to your kid, and then they write the answers to their questions. And I have been starting to do this with all 7 of my children. So we'll see if I can keep up with that. But I feel like, again, it's kind of creating a journal, like a long-term journal that we can look back on. And it's also just another way that I've been trying to connect with my kids. We don't always have time to sit down and have a long conversation. And even when we do, sometimes it, deteriorates into noises and weird things that are not necessarily relationship building in the same way that I would like to have. So I'm excited about this for that reason. And then I also have one. So my husband and I have one. There's one that's for couples. And it's the same kind of thing. Like, each page has the same questions, and you write them for each other and then pass it back and forth. And that has been special. And actually we took that with us to Marriage Encounter. That was when we started that, I think. So anyway.
Okay.
And then the other actual book I have, it looks like a Bible. It's not the Bible. It is the Book of Common Prayer. And so this is one, again, with my kind of like exploration into spiritual formation practices and liturgy that was not a part of my growing up. I felt like I had seen this enough different places that I thought, okay, I need to buy one. And I've only had it for a very short time, but I kind of read through it, and I skimmed through it. And now I'm kind of like, okay, so how do I start using this? So I haven't answered that question yet, but I'm excited. I'm delighted to have it and excited to start using it. So those are my actual books. I had a couple different apps I wanted to share too. Like I've got a little note here. One is the Daily Audio Bible app. And I think I'm a little bit late to the game in this one because I think it's been around for quite a while. But I love listening to it. It goes through the whole Bible in a year. And the guy who does it offers some really great kind of context for each thing. And then it's so fantastic because at the end of the daily broadcast, they have people who have like called in and have prayers or like responses to other people's requests for prayers. And just hearing from the community around the world that's listening to this together is really awesome. I like that a lot. And then the other 3 are all prayer apps. One is called 31 Ways to Pray for Your Kids. And it's just got a little daily short prayer about something. And then the other 2 are Pray for Your Son, 31 days, and Pray for Your Daughter, 31 days. And so they're more specific to your kids. And so I've been doing that.
And you have a lot. How many children do you have? 7. Yeah. So that's an endeavor. That's you almost, it's almost actually kind of nice to have something. I'm actually, when I said I was going through Luke, I get a ping every morning from a church in Marietta, Georgia, a Vineyard church. It's another one of the ones that I watch, but they did a small group. They're like, hey, we're going to start going through this. And so every morning, common rule, I get to look at my phone.
Yeah.
I get to look at my phone in the morning before work, and I'm like, oh yeah, there it is. I'm supposed to be in Luke 7 today, and thank you for that reminder. So it's, if you're balanced, you can utilize the technology to help out with things like that. One other technology, if you're not into like books and you're like just into articles, shameless plug for Vineyard USA. They've got over 300 articles on their page. If you go to vineyardusa.org, up in the top, it says library. And you just click on library, and they've got a couple of podcasts, and they've got a couple of videos and sermons, some Phil Strout stuff. But what really shines for me in there is there's, like I said, over 300 articles in there, wide ranging from different people, different walks of life, and just nice short 1,000-word articles. So if you're not really into books, but you know, what are people saying about this, or, you know, especially something specific to, you know, our theology and the vineyard, it stays inside that context. So it's really cool.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, we certainly haven't had any lack of conversation, and
we have covered a lot of different media.
Yes.
Which is what we're looking for, right? So
definitely. Yeah, no, I think this is fantastic. I thank you so much for coming on and going through this with me. And next time, since everyone already has heard your background now, and they can go back and listen to it, we can dig right into the resources right away. But thank you so much for coming, Dan.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And we'll see you next time.
Alrighty.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us today on the Life on the Fulcrum podcast. You can find us everywhere you listen to podcasts, and you can find information about the Vineyard Church of Wellsboro at wellsborovineyard.org, or check us out on Facebook under the Vineyard Church of Wellsboro, on Instagram under Wellsboro Vineyard, that's all one word, or on Twitter at VC Wellsboro. Thanks. See you around.